Hello, everyone. I'm Adam, and it's great to have you here with us today. Whether you're tuning in for the first time or you've been following us for a while, we're excited to share some valuable tips with you today.
And I'm Julia. It's always a pleasure to be here, helping you on your English learning journey. We know learning a new language can be challenging, but with the right tools and guidance, it becomes so much easier. So if you're ready, we have something special planned for today's episode.
That's right, Julia. We all know how important it is to speak English fluently, but sometimes it can feel difficult to sound natural like a native speaker, right?
Exactly. You might know the words and you might even know the grammar rules, but putting them together in a way that sounds smooth and comfortable can be tricky.
So if you've ever wondered how you can take your English speaking skills to the next level and sound more like a native speaker, this episode is for you.
Yes. In today's episode, we are going to share some amazing tips, or should we say hacks, that will really help you. These hacks are easy to follow and designed to make speaking English a more natural experience for you.
Whether you're just starting out or you've been learning English for a while, these hacks will be useful for you. Even if you feel confident in your vocabulary and grammar, there's always room to improve how naturally you speak.
Right. We'll be talking about the small things that can make a big difference in your everyday conversations, from how to use the right phrases to how to train your brain to think in English. And don't worry, we'll keep it simple and easy to follow, especially for beginners.
Exactly. Our goal is to make sure that by the end of this episode, you feel more confident when speaking English and you can start applying these hacks right away.
So, whether you're preparing for a trip, studying for an exam, or just want to improve your communication skills, stick around, because these tips will help you sound more fluent and confident.
And don't forget, speaking naturally doesn't happen overnight, but with regular practice and these hacks, you'll definitely see progress. So, let's dive into it and start with our first hack, listening, which is key to speaking naturally. Now, let's talk about one of the most important but often overlooked aspects of learning to speak English naturally, listening. In fact, I would say that one of the absolute top hacks to sounding more like a native speaker is to immerse yourself in listening as much as possible. The more you expose yourself to English, the more familiar you become with how the language sounds in real conversations. It's not just about hearing words, it's about absorbing the natural flow of the language, the way sentences are structured, and the way different tones are used to express emotions.
Exactly, Adam. Listening isn't just a passive activity. When you actively listen to spoken English, whether it's through conversations, media, or even casual dialogues, you begin to internalize the natural rhythm, cadence, and tone that native speakers use. These elements are what make a speaker sound fluent, and they are essential if your goal is to speak naturally. It's not just about the words themselves, but how those words are spoken, how they rise and fall in tone, and how they're strung together to create meaning in a more authentic way. And by consistently exposing yourself to how native speakers talk, you're training your brain to recognize and replicate those same patterns when you speak.
That's a great point, Julia. And I think one thing learners should understand is that listening is the foundation for speaking. It's like how children learn their first language. They spend months, even years, just listening before they ever speak a word. And during that time, they're absorbing all the subtle details of the language, from pronunciation to grammar, without even realizing it. As adult learners of English, we can replicate this process by making listening a central part of our practice. It's important to listen to as much English as you can, even when you're not actively studying.
Absolutely, and one of the best ways to do this is to surround yourself with English wherever possible. You can incorporate listening practice into your daily routine by listening to English songs, tuning into English podcasts, or even watching your favorite movies and TV shows in English. I always recommend turning on English subtitles when you watch something because it allows you to connect the spoken words with their written form, which is especially helpful for beginners. You'll start to notice patterns in speech, and you'll pick up on common phrases and expressions that will make your own speaking more natural over time.
Yes, and one important thing to remember when you're listening is not to rush the process. Don't feel like you have to understand every single word right away. Focus more on the overall flow and melody of the language, because this is what helps you develop that natural feel. You don't need to know every single vocabulary word to benefit from listening. Even if you don't catch every detail, you're still training your ear to get used to how English sounds in different contexts. Whether it's a casual conversation between friends, a news broadcast, or dialogue in a movie. Every type of listening experience gives you a new perspective on the language.
And another great tip to take your listening practice a step further is to mimic the way native speakers talk. This is where the real magic happens. After you listen to a conversation or a scene in a movie, try to repeat what you've just heard. Don't worry if it's not perfect the first time. What's important is that you're imitating the accent, the intonation, and the rhythm. When you mimic native speakers, you're essentially training your muscles and your brain to produce the same sounds in a similar way. And over time, you'll notice that your speaking starts to sound more fluid and natural without even thinking about it.
That's such a great piece of advice, Julia, because by mimicking native speakers, you're not just practicing individual words. You're practicing the whole package, how sentences are constructed, how stress and emphasis work in English, and how people use pauses and inflections to convey different meanings. If you listen to English often enough and repeat what you hear, you'll start to feel more comfortable with the language, and you'll gradually improve your ability to speak without hesitating or second-guessing yourself. The goal here is to get to a point where speaking English feels as natural as possible, and listening is your first step toward achieving that.
Let's move on to another important hack for speaking English naturally, and that's incorporating common phrases and idioms into your everyday conversations. You see, one thing that sets native speakers apart from learners is their frequent use of expressions that go beyond just literal meanings. These are phrases that you might not find in textbooks but are incredibly common in casual, everyday English. When you start to use these expressions, your speech instantly sounds more fluent and natural because you're using the language the way native speakers do. It's one of those subtle changes that can have a big impact on how others perceive your fluency.
Exactly, Julia. Native speakers don't just string together individual words when they talk. They rely on set phrases, expressions, and idioms that carry specific meanings or emotions. These expressions allow them to communicate more efficiently and add a layer of personality and style to their speech. For example, instead of saying something very basic like, "I'm very happy," which of course is perfectly fine, but maybe a little plain, you could say something more colorful like, "I'm over the moon." That expression means the same thing, but it adds a sense of excitement and emotion to your words. It also shows that you're comfortable using natural-sounding English rather than sticking strictly to formal grammar rules.
That's such a good example, Adam, because phrases like "over the moon" are exactly the kinds of expressions that native speakers use without even thinking about it. And the more you hear and use these kinds of phrases, the more you'll notice that they make conversations feel much more relaxed and casual, which is exactly what we want when we're aiming to sound natural. Phrases like these add flavor to your speech. They make you sound less robotic, more engaged, and a lot more fluent. Plus, using idioms and common phrases can help you express emotions, opinions, and ideas in a way that's both fun and relatable to native speakers.
And the great thing about idioms and common expressions is that you don't need to know 100 of them to make a difference. Even just learning a handful of these phrases and incorporating them into your speech can have a huge impact. Take a simple phrase like, "I don't know," for instance. Sure, you can say that and everyone will understand you, but if you say something like, "I have no idea," or "I haven't got a clue," it immediately sounds more like the way a native speaker would express uncertainty. These small changes, while subtle, go a long way in making you sound more conversational and comfortable in English.
And another point worth mentioning is that these common phrases and idioms often have a cultural or emotional component that literal translations don't capture. So when you use them, you're not just learning language, you're learning a piece of the culture behind the language. For example, saying "I'm in hot water" to express that you're in trouble gives the listener a more vivid image compared to just saying "I'm in trouble." It's these kinds of expressions that make conversations more dynamic and interesting. And once you get used to using them, they'll help you fit right into English-speaking environments with ease.
Right. And I think one of the reasons these expressions are so powerful is that they allow you to communicate complex feelings and ideas in a very compact way. Think about the phrase, "It's a piece of cake," which means something is really easy. Instead of explaining that a task is simple and doesn't require much effort, you just say, "It's a piece of cake," and everyone immediately knows what you mean. This kind of communication is both efficient and effective, and it's a great way to enhance your conversations without having to rely on long, complicated sentences.
Yes, and here's another practical example for our listeners. Instead of always saying "thank you," which of course is polite and should be used often, try using expressions like "I really appreciate it," or "That's so kind of you." These small variations make your language sound more flexible and natural, especially in everyday interactions. They also help to convey different shades of meaning, showing that you're not just repeating the same phrase over and over again. Little changes like these can really transform how you speak English and make you sound more like a native speaker.
Exactly, Julia. And these little changes, as simple as they seem, can make a big difference in how fluent you sound. So, our tip for listeners is to start incorporating these phrases into your daily practice. You can keep a notebook of common idioms and phrases you hear in conversations, movies, or even in podcasts like this one, and make it a point to use them when speaking. Over time, these expressions will become second nature, and before you know it, you'll be speaking English in a much more natural and effortless way. Now, let's get to one of the most important parts of learning any language: practice. As we've said before, there's no magic formula to becoming fluent overnight, but one thing that will undoubtedly make a huge difference is consistent practice. The more you speak, the more natural it becomes. Speaking English is like exercising a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And the stronger it gets, the more confident and natural you'll sound over time. But it's not just about speaking once in a while. It's about making it a part of your daily routine.
Exactly, Adam. There's a saying that practice makes perfect, but I like to think of it as practice makes progress. No one speaks perfectly all the time, not even native speakers. But if you make it a point to speak English every single day, even if it's just for a few minutes, you'll notice huge improvements. And one thing learners often worry about is making mistakes, but that's perfectly okay. In fact, mistakes are a natural part of learning. It's much better to try and make mistakes than to stay silent and miss the opportunity to improve. Every time you speak, you're getting closer to your goal of speaking naturally.
That's so true, Julia. The fear of making mistakes can really hold people back, but you've got to push past that fear. When you make mistakes, you're learning what to correct, and each mistake is a step closer to fluency. What I always tell learners is that fluency comes from using the language, not just studying it. You can read all the books and listen to all the podcasts you want, but if you're not actually speaking, it's going to be hard to make real progress. Speaking is where everything you've learned comes together: grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, and even those common phrases and idioms we talked about earlier.
And if you're thinking, "Oh, well, I don't have anyone to speak with," don't worry. There are still plenty of ways you can practice speaking on your own. One of the easiest hacks is to start by speaking to yourself. It might sound a bit strange at first, but talking to yourself in English is a great way to get comfortable with the language. You can narrate your day, describe what you're doing, or even imagine conversations. This kind of solo practice helps you build confidence and get used to thinking in English, which is a huge step towards speaking naturally.
Yes, and another great tip is to record yourself speaking. You can pick a topic, record yourself talking about it for a minute or two, and then listen back to see how you did. Pay attention to your pronunciation, your tone, and your fluency. Are there any words you stumble over? Do you sound natural, or are you pausing too much? By listening to yourself, you can identify areas where you need to improve, and over time, you'll notice that your speaking becomes smoother. It's also a great way to track your progress, because you can go back and listen to your earlier recordings and see how far you've come.
And of course, if you have the opportunity to speak with someone else, especially a native speaker or someone fluent in English, that's even better. Regular conversations with a partner are one of the best ways to practice speaking naturally. You can set up weekly or even daily conversations where you just chat about anything: your day, your hobbies, or even the weather. The point is to keep the conversation going and use the language in a natural setting. If you don't have a native speaker around, you can always connect with language partners online. There are so many platforms where you can find people who are also learning English or who want to help you practice.
Absolutely. And remember, the goal isn't to speak perfectly, it's to speak regularly. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll feel, and the more natural your conversations will become. And speaking of practice, why don't we do a quick role play to show everyone how easy it can be to practice speaking naturally? Even simple conversations can help build your confidence.
Great idea, Adam. Let's do a short role play to demonstrate how using simple, natural phrases can make a big difference.
Hi, Julia. How are you today?
Hey, Adam. I'm doing well, thanks. How about you?
I'm good, just a bit tired. I had a long day at work.
Oh, I can imagine. What do you do to relax after a long day?
Well, I usually watch a movie or listen to some music. It helps me unwind.
That sounds nice. I like to read a book before bed. It's a good way to relax.
Yeah, reading is great too. Speaking of books, have you read anything interesting lately?
Actually, yes. I just finished a mystery novel. It was so gripping I couldn't put it down.
Wow, that sounds exciting. I might have to check it out.
And just like that, you've practiced a natural conversation. It doesn't have to be complicated. Even a short, simple chat like this one helps you get used to speaking English in a natural conversational way.
Exactly. And notice how we used some common phrases like, "How are you?" and "I couldn't put it down." These are the kinds of phrases that make your speech sound more fluent and natural. The more you practice these, the more they'll become second nature when you speak.
So, to our listeners, whether you're practicing on your own or with a friend, just remember to keep speaking every day. The more you speak, the more natural it will feel. And before you know it, you'll be speaking English with confidence and ease. One of the most powerful hacks for speaking English more naturally is to actually start thinking in English. It may sound challenging at first, but it's an incredibly effective way to improve your fluency. You see, when you're constantly translating everything from your native language into English in your head, it slows you down. You end up focusing too much on translating the words rather than focusing on the conversation. This can create a lot of hesitation, and that hesitation can make you feel less confident when you're speaking. On the other hand, if you can train your brain to think in English, you'll find that your words will come out much more easily and naturally.
Exactly. It's about making that mental switch so that English becomes your default language of thought, at least for the time you're speaking it. The truth is, when you're thinking in your native language, you have to go through a long process of translation. First, you think of what you want to say in your native language. Then you translate it into English, and finally, you try to speak it. That whole process takes time and can make your speech sound slow or less fluent. But if you can think directly in English, you cut out the middle step, and your words flow much more smoothly. It's a key hack to sounding more like a native speaker because it allows you to react and speak naturally without overthinking.
Right. And don't worry if thinking in English seems difficult at first. Like anything else in language learning, it takes time and practice to get the hang of it. You don't have to jump straight into complex thoughts in English. Start small. One great way to begin is by naming the objects around you in English. For example, when you're in your room, look around and think, "This is a chair, that's a table, my bed is by the window." Simple sentences like this help train your brain to associate the English word with the object itself, rather than first thinking of the word in your native language and then translating it.
Yes, and you can also do this with your daily routine. As you go through your day, try thinking in English about what you're doing. For example, when you're brushing your teeth, you can think, "I'm brushing my teeth now." Or when you're making breakfast, you can think, "I'm cooking eggs." These are simple thoughts, but they help build the habit of thinking in English. Over time, your brain will become more comfortable operating in English, and soon enough, you won't have to work so hard to find the right words when you're speaking. It will just come naturally.
Exactly. The more you practice thinking in English, the more natural it becomes. At first, it might feel a little slow or awkward, but keep at it. Your brain is rewiring itself to function in a new language, and that takes time. But the great thing is, once you build that habit, you'll find that you don't have to think as much when you're speaking. You'll be able to respond more quickly, and your conversations will flow more smoothly. It's an incredibly useful hack that can make a big difference in your fluency.
And remember, this doesn't mean you have to think in English all the time, especially in the beginning. Start with just a few minutes a day and gradually increase it as you get more comfortable. The goal is to integrate English into your daily thoughts so that speaking it becomes a more natural process. Over time, you'll notice that you're able to respond in English without having to pause and translate in your head. That's when you'll know you're making real progress toward fluency.
That's a great point, Adam. Thinking in English is like building a new habit, and once it becomes second nature, speaking the language will feel much more effortless. So, to our listeners out there, don't be afraid to give this a try. Start small, practice daily, and before you know it, you'll be thinking and speaking in English more naturally than ever.
When it comes to speaking English naturally, another essential factor to consider is pronunciation. Now, it's important to understand that you don't need to have a perfect accent to be understood or to speak naturally. In fact, having an accent is perfectly normal, and it shows the richness of your linguistic background. However, what is crucial is having clear pronunciation. When your words are pronounced clearly, people can understand you better, and your conversations will flow more easily. So, while you shouldn't stress about sounding exactly like a native speaker, it's a good idea to focus on making sure your words are easy to understand.
Exactly, Adam. Clear speech can make a huge difference, and even though English has many tricky sounds that might not exist in your native language, it's totally possible to improve with practice. A good place to start is by paying close attention to how native speakers pronounce certain words, especially the ones you find difficult. You can do this by listening to native speakers in podcasts, TV shows, movies, or even online videos. It's all about training your ear to hear the differences in pronunciation and then trying to mimic those sounds. The more you expose yourself to the way native speakers talk, the easier it becomes to pick up on the subtleties of English pronunciation.
That's right. And the great news is, these days, there are so many useful tools and resources available to help you improve your pronunciation. One of the simplest tools you can use is a pronunciation app or online platform. For example, Google has a pronunciation tool where you can type in a word and hear how it's supposed to sound. You can listen to the pronunciation as many times as you need to until you feel comfortable saying the word yourself. There are also apps that allow you to record your own voice and compare it to native speakers. These tools are great because they give you instant feedback on how you're doing.
Yes, and speaking of recording your voice, this is actually one of the best techniques you can use to improve your pronunciation. Many learners feel self-conscious about how they sound when speaking English, but recording yourself can really help you become more aware of any areas where you might need to improve. When you listen back to the recording, you can hear things that you might not notice while you're speaking. For instance, you might realize that you're not pronouncing certain sounds clearly or that you're rushing through certain words. Once you identify these issues, you can work on correcting them.
And let's not forget, pronunciation isn't just about individual words. It's also about the rhythm and flow of your speech. In English, some words are stressed more than others, and understanding these patterns can help your speech sound more natural. Listening carefully to how native speakers stress words in a sentence and practicing that yourself is another way to work on your pronunciation. You can even take a simple sentence and say it a few times, focusing on the stress and intonation. Over time, you'll find that your pronunciation improves, and you'll feel more confident speaking.
That's a great point, Adam. Sometimes learners focus so much on getting individual sounds right that they forget about the overall rhythm of their speech. But when you practice, try to pay attention to both the individual sounds of words and how those words fit together in a sentence. As Adam mentioned, English has a particular rhythm, and mastering that rhythm can make a big difference in how natural your speech sounds. Even small adjustments, like slowing down and pronouncing each word clearly, can have a significant impact.
Absolutely. And one more thing. Don't forget that improving your pronunciation takes time. Be patient with yourself, and don't get discouraged if it doesn't happen overnight. The more you practice, the better you'll get, and before you know it, your pronunciation will be much clearer. So, to all our listeners, take advantage of the tools available to you, practice consistently, and keep recording and listening to yourself. Over time, you'll notice real progress.
Exactly. And remember, the goal isn't perfection, it's improvement. With a little bit of effort and the right mindset, you'll be speaking English more clearly and naturally in no time. So don't be afraid to try out these tips, and most importantly, have fun with the process of learning.
Now that we've talked about the importance of pronunciation and other key hacks for speaking naturally, let's dive into one of the most effective ways to improve your English skills: engaging in conversations. This is essential because, after all, the best way to practice a language is by using it in real-life situations.
Absolutely. Engaging in conversations not only helps you apply what you've learned, but also builds your confidence. You might be surprised at how much you can communicate when you actually start talking. One of the great things about conversations is that they allow you to practice speaking in a way that feels authentic and spontaneous. You're forced to think on your feet, which is incredibly valuable for developing fluency.
That's right. One effective approach is to seek out language exchange partners. These are individuals who are native English speakers and who are interested in learning your native language. This way, both parties can benefit from the conversation. You can spend half the time speaking in English and the other half in your language. It's a win-win situation where both of you can learn and grow.
And if you're not sure where to find language exchange partners, there are numerous online platforms and apps designed for this purpose. Websites like Tandem and HelloTalk connect language learners from all around the world. You can have text, voice, or even video conversations, which can really help you get used to speaking English in a relaxed environment. This also gives you the chance to interact with people from different cultures, which can make the learning experience even richer.
That's an excellent point, Julia. Another way to engage in conversations is by joining local language clubs or community groups. Many cities have language meetups where learners gather to practice speaking. Being in a group setting can take the pressure off, as you're surrounded by others who are also learning. It creates a supportive environment where you can practice and make mistakes without feeling embarrassed.
Exactly. And if you're feeling nervous about speaking in a group, start with smaller, one-on-one conversations. This could be with a friend, a family member, or anyone who speaks English. You could set a regular time each week to chat in English about various topics, like your favorite movies, books, or current events. The more you practice, the more comfortable you will become.
And let's not forget about the power of asking questions during conversations. This is a great way to keep the dialogue going and show your interest in what the other person is saying. When you ask questions, you not only practice your speaking skills, but also enhance your listening skills as you pay attention to the answers. For example, if someone mentions they went hiking, you can ask about their experience, what trail they took, or what they enjoyed most about it. This keeps the conversation lively and engaging.
That's a fantastic strategy. And remember, it's completely normal to make mistakes during conversations. Don't be afraid of them. Each mistake is an opportunity to learn and improve. If someone corrects you, thank them and take it as a sign of their willingness to help you grow. The more you speak, the more you'll understand the nuances of the language, and those mistakes will become less frequent.
Definitely. And for those who may not have access to native speakers, don't underestimate the value of practicing speaking with yourself. You can use prompts or topics to start a conversation in your mind, or even aloud. Talk about your day, describe what you see around you, or summarize a movie you watched recently. This self-talk can help you become more comfortable with expressing your thoughts in English.
That's a great reminder, Adam. You can even set specific goals for your conversations. For example, aim to use new vocabulary words, practice a specific grammatical structure, or focus on improving your fluency. Setting these goals can make your practice sessions more productive and focused.
Absolutely. Engaging in conversations, whether with others or by yourself, is key to making real progress in your English speaking skills. The more you practice, the more natural it will feel, and you'll find that your confidence grows along with your ability. So, to our listeners, make it a point to find opportunities to engage in conversations, be open to learning from mistakes, and remember that practice truly makes perfect.
That's the spirit. Keep pushing yourself to speak, ask questions, and connect with others. Before you know it, you'll be speaking English more naturally and confidently than ever. So get out there and start those conversations. As we continue our journey towards speaking English naturally, let's explore another effective hack that many learners often overlook. Immersion. Immersing yourself in the language means surrounding yourself with English in as many ways as possible. This method can be incredibly beneficial in improving your fluency and comprehension.
Absolutely, Julia. Immersion can take many forms, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have to travel to an English-speaking country. You can create an immersive environment right where you are. For instance, consider changing the language settings on your phone, computer, or social media accounts to English. This simple switch can expose you to new vocabulary and phrases that you may not encounter otherwise. It forces you to think and interact in English daily.
That's such a practical tip, Adam. In addition to changing your device settings, you can also immerse yourself by consuming English media. This could include watching English movies or TV shows without subtitles, or listening to English audiobooks and podcasts. By doing this, you're not just passively consuming content, you're actively training your ear to recognize different accents, intonations, and slang. Over time, you'll find that you start to pick up on the nuances of the language, making it easier for you to replicate in your own speech.
I couldn't agree more, Julia. Another powerful form of immersion is reading extensively in English. This could be anything from novels and articles to blogs or news websites. The more you read, the more familiar you become with sentence structures, vocabulary, and the flow of the language. It also helps to expand your knowledge on various topics, making it easier to engage in conversations about different subjects. When you read, don't hesitate to underline or highlight unfamiliar words and make it a point to look them up later. This builds your vocabulary and reinforces your understanding.
That's a fantastic strategy. Plus, you could take it a step further by discussing what you've read with a friend or in an online group. This not only reinforces your learning, but also provides another opportunity to practice speaking. When you articulate your thoughts about a book or article, it allows you to use new vocabulary and practice your ability to express ideas clearly in English.
Yes, and let's not forget about the benefits of surrounding yourself with English speakers, whether online or in your community. If you're unable to travel or join local groups, consider joining online forums or communities where English is the primary language. Platforms like Reddit, Discord, or Facebook groups focused on your interests can be excellent places to engage with others and participate in discussions. Engaging in these online communities allows you to practice your writing skills and receive feedback from native speakers.
Additionally, you can immerse yourself through English music. Listening to English songs not only introduces you to the language, but also helps you learn pronunciation and rhythm. Try to pay attention to the lyrics and sing along. This practice can improve your fluency and make speaking feel more natural. You might even want to look up the meaning of the lyrics and discuss the song's themes with friends to deepen your understanding.
All great points, Julia. Immersion is about making English a part of your daily life, even in small ways. You can set aside time each day to focus on English activities, whether it's watching a short video, reading a few pages of a book, or even cooking while following an English recipe. By integrating the language into your everyday routine, you not only learn, but also make it more enjoyable.
Exactly. And remember that immersion is not just about input, it's also about output. Try to write down your thoughts in English in a journal. Reflecting on your day or expressing your opinions on various topics in writing will help reinforce your learning. This practice helps you think in English more fluently and prepares you for verbal communication.
And while you're immersing yourself, it's essential to stay curious and open to learning. If you encounter expressions or idioms that you don't understand, take the time to research them. Curiosity leads to discovery, and each new piece of knowledge adds to your language arsenal. Engage with content that challenges you, as this is where significant growth happens.
Finally, don't forget to celebrate your progress, no matter how small. Every time you immerse yourself in English, you're making strides toward becoming a more confident speaker. Keep track of your improvements and remind yourself that every bit of practice counts. And soon enough, you will notice a positive shift in how naturally you speak.
So, to our listeners, embrace the power of immersion in your English learning journey. Surround yourself with the language, engage actively, and let English become a part of your life. Remember, the more you immerse yourself, the more naturally you will speak. Keep pushing yourself to explore new content, interact with others, and enjoy the journey of learning. As we come to the end of today's episode, let's take a moment to recap the invaluable hacks we shared for speaking English more naturally. First, we discussed the importance of listening. By immersing yourself in English audio, whether through songs, podcasts, or movies, you develop a keen ear for the rhythm and nuances of the language. The more you listen, the more familiar you become with how native speakers communicate, which is essential for sounding natural.
Absolutely, Adam. Then we moved on to the significance of using common phrases and idioms. These expressions not only enrich your vocabulary, but also help you blend in more seamlessly with native speakers. For instance, replacing "I'm very happy" with "I'm over the moon" can make your speech sound much more fluent and relatable. These little changes, as we discussed, can create a significant impact in your conversations.
Next, we emphasize the necessity of consistent daily practice. Speaking English regularly, whether with yourself, a friend, or in language exchange programs, solidifies your learning and builds your confidence. Remember, making mistakes is part of the learning process, and every effort counts toward your progress.
Yes. And then we highlighted the concept of thinking in English. This is a crucial hack because when you start to think directly in English rather than translating from your native language, you'll find that your speech flows more smoothly. You can practice this by naming objects around you or narrating your daily routine in your mind. Over time, it will become second nature.
Finally, we discussed the importance of watching your pronunciation. Clear pronunciation is vital for effective communication, and there are numerous tools available to help you improve. Utilizing apps, online resources, and even recording yourself can make a significant difference in your clarity and confidence when speaking.
As we wrap up, I want to encourage all our listeners. Remember, learning to speak naturally takes time and practice. It's a journey that involves consistent effort and patience, so be gentle with yourself. Each small step you take in practicing and improving your English contributes to your overall progress.
Definitely. Keep practicing every day, and don't hesitate to seek out new opportunities to immerse yourself in the language. The more you engage with English, the more confident and natural you'll become in your speech. You've got this.
If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to check out our other episodes on the English Globe, where we explore even more English learning tips and techniques that can help you on your journey to fluency. There's a wealth of information waiting for you, and each episode is designed to provide you with practical advice.
And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. This way, you'll never miss an episode filled with tips and insights that can aid you in becoming a better English speaker. Your journey to mastering English is important to us, and we're here to support you every step of the way.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time and commitment to improving your English. Keep practicing, stay curious, and we'll see you next time on the English Globe.
Take care, everyone, and happy learning!